Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another electrifying episode of the Raising Cain Show. Tonight, we have a guest who stands as a true defender of our Constitution and a champion of American freedoms, Sheriff Richard Mack. Renowned in his unwavering defense of the Second Amendment and his staunch belief in the power of local law enforcement to uphold constitutional rights, Mack has been at the forefront of some of the most critical battles in American politics. As the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, he has taken a bold stand against federal overreach, advocating for the principles of our founding fathers intended. Join us as we explore his landmark Supreme Court case, his tireless political activism, and his relentless fight to protect the Constitution. This is a conversation you're not going to want to miss. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff Mack. Sheriff, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Nate. It's great to be with you. I'm honored to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, when I had heard that I had the opportunity to talk with you, I was pretty excited, especially considering your stance on protecting, our constitutional rights against federal overreach. Yeah. I don't know if how familiar you are with my story, but I was a federal whistleblower, FBI whistleblower, that exposed the FBI's corruption in covering up Hillary Clinton's in her organization's corruption regarding money laundering, public corruption, securities and exchange fraud, and even terrorism financing. And,
so you work for the FBI?
I did, yes. I was a contractor working at Patriots Plaza in their information assurance division back in 2017, 2018. And most people, know me as the Uranium One whistleblower, but it was involved a lot more than just Uranium One. Yeah. And I have a funny kind of opening story, I guess, to tell you about, because after I blew the whistle, the FBI, of course, made it their mission to try to destroy my life. And I went through the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act and went through the formal process of going through the Inspector General Horowitz. He was actually a stand-up man, went to great lengths to protect my identity, to allow me to remain anonymous. He gave a credibility rating on the information that we provided, or that I provided, and he ended up eventually allowing me to take that both to the House and Senate Intel committees. But 4 months later, the House changed hands to the Democrats, and Adam Schiff took over from Devin Nunes, and he basically stopped the entire investigation. And I'm sure it was around that time he probably also leaked back to the FBI what information had been provided to them, because about a month later, the FBI raided my house with 16 agents. And it was quite an ordeal, and we went through quite a bit. And there was, not everybody at the FBI is, not everybody even there at that raid would I consider a bad actor, but the special agent in charge absolutely was. He went on a kind of a private vendetta, interviewing people on his own without other agents there, trying to smear my name and go through a campaign to try to go on a witch hunt. In the end, he ended up out of his job. I ended up, my family was quite a bit dealing with a lot, fallout from that. I ended up getting poisoned twice, had the lug nuts on my vehicle loosened. We ended up leaving Maryland and moving to the great state of West Virginia because I wanted to be able to defend and protect myself. And believe it or not, after going through all that, when I went to go try to get a concealed carry with Maryland State, I had to go through Maryland State Police for it. The officer that I spoke to, he told me, even though I had my own, I had my own company that was running, $35,000 a month through it, which that alone should have allowed me to get it. Even though I had police reports, I had, a national headline, and I was a protected whistleblower, that neither of those things would allow for me to get a concealed carry. But when the guy read the report, he goes, did you really blow the whistle on Hillary Clinton? I said, yeah. And he goes, man, I wish I could issue you one, but I can't. The rules here just won't allow me. He says, but he goes, do you have a top secret clearance by chance? I said, yeah, I do actually. And he said, well, they just passed a law that, would allow me to issue one if you can get your security manager to sign off that you courier top secret information. And I just so happened to have a courier card for that purpose. And so I contacted her, and she happened to be a conservative, and she said, absolutely, I'll sign off on it. So I got it in. And the guy, when I called him up the second time, he goes, I'm going to expedite this for you. And so, but about a month later, I show up at my house. I got home from work, and I come home, and there's two sheriff's deputies outside my door. And I'm just thinking, oh no, what now? And so I walk up, and my wife was talking to him at the door, and they said, oh no, everything's fine. Don't worry. The only reason we're here is at that point I had been on social media a lot because of having, gone through what I had gone through with the poisonings and everything. I felt the safest thing for me was to make sure that everybody knows I'm not suicidal, make sure that everybody knows that I'm healthy. And so I was on, social media all the time at that point, but I had stopped messaging and stopped saying anything because my lawyer had, was getting frustrated with me. He wanted me to get off social media. And so I stopped messaging for a couple of days. And apparently somebody who was following me on Twitter had contacted the Frederick County Sheriff's Department and had asked them to do a wellness check on me because they thought I had been whacked. And so they were there at my house, checking.
Well, that was nice of them to check on you.
It was. And in fact, both of the officers, thanked me, for what I did. And both the deputies, and one of them said to me afterwards, he said, oh, by the way, I follow you on Twitter. And so he told me, he says, look, if there's any problems at all, if you run into any issues, if you have any suspicions about something, contact us. The Frederick County Sheriff's Department's got your back. And I was really blessed by that. It gave me a lot of peace of mind. And
that's what we need in about 1,500 counties nationwide. That sheriffs are that serious about their job and defending you against corruption.
I agree. And in fact, I grew up with I had both uncle on my dad's side and on my mom's side were both Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies. And one of them, my uncle on my dad's side, he retired as a detective with LA County Sheriff. So I've always had a respect and admiration for law enforcement. And that when I went to the FBI, I was so proud of that opportunity to serve there because of, the history of the FBI having, being the premier law enforcement agency. It wasn't until I got there that I found out just how corrupt and how politically biased it had become under the, Obama years. Yes. So, it was pretty crazy, but I don't want the show to be all about me, and I want to talk about you and find out, and really. I've got to respond to your FBI stuff. All right.
Because we have a lot in common here. First of all, I've been very close to the FBI almost my whole life. Mm-hmm. My dad retired from the FBI in 1975. My cousin, my first cousin, by the way, who is the son of my dad's twin sister. And so he became deputy director of the FBI and did that for about 10 years. But between Sessions and Free, he was the director of the FBI. And we thought he was going to be picked, but instead, was it Clinton that picked Free?
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
And so he stayed as the number 2 man of the FBI under Free. And he and I, just when we got together for things, could not talk politics. We could not talk Ruby Ridge. We could not talk Waco or any of those things, even though I had written extensively about both. And anyway, he was the one that actually defended what they did at Waco to Congress.
Oh, man.
And I did just the opposite. And he's a good guy. But look, this is what I can tell you honestly about the FBI. Even the good guys, they just follow orders.
That's what I saw. To me, it's like, and I think this is a problem, not just with the FBI, but it's in any institution that has authority given to them, right? There's always a propensity for those who will just obey the orders. I remember in college, I think it was Psychology 101. We went over, there was an experiment that was done where they had these students sign up to be the police and other students or jail guards, and they had other students that were going to be the prisoners. And things in this experiment got out of control. And the whole point of it was to prove they were trying to understand why the Nazi guards were able to do such terrible things. Yeah. And so they did this experiment, and the experiment got banned after because it created such PTSD for some of these students. Yeah. But you had students that were friends with each other, but once they got in this role and they were told what to do, and they were told to do things that went outside the bounds of what was normal, and basically violating the rights of the prisoners, they went ahead and they did it because they were told to do so. And they found
I'm familiar with that. I'm
familiar
with that experiment.
And they had another experiment that also replicated it in a different way, where they hooked up kids to electrodes, and they brought teachers in, and they had a knob, and that knob said, when you go, do not go past this, level here, right? Because it can cause harm. Mm-hmm. And so they told the kids ahead of time to fake like they were getting shocked, and that each time they did it, they were going to act like they were getting shocked a little bit more. And so there was no electricity in the experiment, but the teachers didn't know that. And so the teachers were told by the head person, turn the juice up a little bit more. And when it got to the point where it went over into the, past the red zone, 80% of the teachers complied and went into the red zone, even though the knob said, this would cause harm. And the kids were screaming and all of this. Again, it was another one of those experiments at a university that got banned because it caused PTSD for the teachers. But 80% of them obeyed simply because they were told. And that, to me, is the, it is the danger, of people having, positions of authority. I think it's important that we have law enforcement, but we have to make sure that law enforcement have a absolute solid understanding of constitutional rights, and that they're always thinking that in the back of their mind.
Well, proper training, and none of the police academies teach the Constitution or what our fundamental duty is regarding protecting the civil rights of everybody that we come in contact with. They do not train them on the proper role of government. What is it? Where do we find out in any of our foundational documents what the proper role of government is? It says clearly in the Declaration of Independence that to secure these rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights and all others mentioned in the Bill of Rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And so that's the key, and we're not teaching that to our nation's law enforcement. How are they going to know what rights to protect if they don't even know what they are?
Well, and I think that's the same thing too. It's true of like the military. Again, you've got how many of these guys are we all take anybody that works for the federal government or even, people who are in state government, including sheriffs, they take an oath. Those that are in the military, they take an oath. But how many people actually really truly understand that oath? How many have that?
If you've never read the Constitution, how could you understand
Exactly.
it?
Exactly. So I'm curious, you obviously, when you became a sheriff, were you already of that mindset, or was there like a pivotal moment in your career that really made you realize that needed to become an important issue for you?
That's really a good question. I was already a constitutional convert, and it happened when I was a rookie cop. I was in law enforcement 11 and a half years before I ran for sheriff. But that was a police department up in Utah, Provo, Utah. And my wife and I were both from the same community in Arizona. We met there and had our first child, and then we moved to Utah, and I actually tried to get in the FBI 3 different times. And while I was waiting to hear back from the FBI, I hired on as a police officer. And about 2.5 years after I was a cop, I was asked to go undercover. And I decided to do it. My wife and I were given 24 hours to make that decision. And it was life-changing. I mean, it was really life-changing. My wife became a single mother. We had 3 little kids at the time. And I never was allowed to be in public with my children, couldn't go to any of their school activities. The oldest was 6.5. When I finished, he was 7. And then the next one was 5, and the next one was 3.5. And I couldn't go anywhere in public with them, ever. Wow. And I had to sneak home whenever I could to be with them on my days off. And the rest of the time I lived in a cockroach-infested, crappy apartment. And this was probably harder on my wife than it was me.
Sure. Were you doing like drug cases or?
Yes. Anything. So it was fencing, stolen property, drugs, gang activity, you name it. And so and all of that stuff was totally foreign to me. I never partied. I think I took a drink. I think I took a drink of a beer twice in my life, and I hated it. So I had no desire to do any of that. But I never smoked marijuana in my life, except when I was an undercover cop.
Wow, that must have been quite an interesting experience.
It was way foreign to me in criminal world. Yeah, it was extremely dangerous. And my wife didn't know where I was half the time because it was before cell phones. It was 1982. Wow. And then when I finished that assignment, I came back to patrol, and there were things that I started seeing before I went under, but I kind of put them on pause when I went undercover, that really disenchanted me with government and law enforcement. And when I started asking all these questions, especially to myself, I said, why do we even have police? So I can be out here collecting taxes? Because I felt more like a tax collector when I was a patrol officer. We're just out here making money for the city and the state, writing all these stupid tickets. And very rarely did it have anything to do with true public safety, where there was a threat to anyone. No, we just hold the radar gun and, okay, next, write the ticket, next, and there was no real public service involved. And so I started really examining my motives for being a cop, but I wanted to also examine the motives of the judges, of my fellow police officers, and the legislature. And I never saw anything that coincided with the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. And so I decided at that time that I was either going to quit law enforcement, or I was going to uphold and defend the Constitution, just like my oath. And in all those questions, I ran smack in the face of the oath of office that I didn't even remember taking. I did not remember taking that oath. And then when I saw that I signed this oath, it really bothered me. I felt like such a liar and a hypocrite that I didn't want to keep my job. But my wife told me, maybe you should consider keeping your job and stop being a hypocrite. And I said, oh, okay. So I studied the Constitution, and I kept a copy of the U.S. Constitution that was in the World Book Encyclopedia that my grandmother had sold us. And that was the computer of the day. That was Google, you know. So anyway, I fell in love with the Constitution, and I took a class from a man called Dr. W. Cleon Skousen, and he's like he's world renowned for being a constitutional expert. He's written about 20 books on the Constitution, and he wrote a book called The Making of America. It's the biggest book I've ever read. It was like 780 pages. And it so touched my heart, and it so impressed me. And I was totally converted. And I took another oath while I was in his class. It was a 2-day class. And there were 240 cops there. And I don't know what happened to the other 239, but this one was converted to America, the founding fathers, and our foundational documents. And I said, I took an oath right then, and I said, I will never be on the wrong side again. And then about 10 years later, a movie came out that said the same thing, and it was Braveheart. And Robert the Bruce told his father that he was never going to betray again, and he said, I will never be on the wrong side again, word for word what I had said. And that really touched me as well. And so ever since then, I became very dedicated to the Constitution. So when I ran for sheriff in 1988, I ran on a constitutional platform, and I said, we're going to be out here protecting rights. Yes, we're going to do all the other things that law enforcement is supposed to do. But we didn't hardly, I'll bet my patrol deputies didn't write 20 tickets the 8 years I was sheriff.
Wow.
And I said, if you write a ticket, you show me. And I made a little pocket-sized Constitution for all of them to be part of their uniform. And I said, when you do something in law enforcement, you better be able to look it up in the Constitution and tell me where you were authorized to do that. And so that worked. And they didn't write very many tickets after that, especially when you read the 8th Amendment. It says no excessive fines or bail, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted.
Very different than what you see going on in with the January 6ers.
Oh, of course.
Unbelievable the amount of just violations of people's Fourth Amendment rights with the excessive spying.
Oh, and don't forget extradition. Not one of them was ever extradited.
That's right.
Because the FBI doesn't follow the law.
No, they don't. And you know, this is something you said. You said that you had not seen, or it felt like you weren't doing public service. You were just being a tax collector for the city.
Yeah.
When
we were revenue agents.
Yeah, I was stationed. I was working for the Navy as a Navy civilian, and we were living in Japan for about 3 years. I was very struck by watching how the Japanese police operated very differently than our police do. And I was watching one day when there was a fight between two guys that happened out in the street. They were both drunk. I mean, they were, belligerently drunk, and they were, yelling at each other and throwing fists. And the police, instead of tossing them on the ground and handcuffing them, they separated them, talked to them, and made sure that they went on their way. I mean, nobody had been really injured or anything like that, but they made sure that they separated the guys, and the attitude was like just how any person would try to de-escalate a situation. Yeah. I was really shocked by that, because I was expecting to see, somebody get tossed to the ground, and, right. And it was just a totally different experience over there. And, and it was very shocking, and I realize it's very different here in America, because we do have gun rights. Yeah. And police officer, or sheriff's deputy going up to a car, they don't know if that person's armed, if they're a criminal, if they're. In fact, my wife has a cousin who was he was shot, and it was during a traffic stop, and the guy opened fire on him, ended up shooting him in the leg. He was on the ground, and he took the assailant out, but but it ended his career. He ended up getting out after that, and now he owns a gun shop. So good on him.
Most shootings do end the career of the officer.
Yeah, he was pretty badly injured from that.
Yeah.
So,
one other thing about the FBI.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So you mentioned that I filed a lawsuit against the federal government.
Yes.
Okay. I'm the only sheriff in American history to do that, or I was the first one. But it's never happened since. But 6 other sheriffs joined me in that lawsuit from across the country.
So that was about Brady handgun.
Brady handgun control,
right?
Can
you
Brady,
explain that for folks that don't understand that?
The Brady bill was the first time in American history where Congress and the White House attempted to commandeer the office of sheriff to enforce one of their laws. Okay. And so this is highly unusual. I had a contract with the federal government with the Federal Bureau of Prisons to take some of their inmates when they had overflow. Well, that was a contract. I agreed to it. I signed off on it. They signed off on it, and we got paid for it. This time, there was no agreement. There was no negotiation, and they threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. Now, all of this information is in this little booklet here. This fits in your shirt pocket, and it's available at cspoa.org. And this is the most powerful little booklet, except maybe unless you have a pocket-sized Bible or the pocket-sized Constitution. After that, every American should have this with you. So when you go on my website and you go to shopping and whatnot, make sure it looks real big, but it's not. But it has the state flags on it. It's white and the state flags talking about state sovereignty. And this is because this is the most powerful state sovereignty case in the history of America. It's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision ever. And it's easy to read this and you'll know why. But we need to show this. You need to pass this around to your sheriff, to your county commissioners, to your county attorney who never seems to side with the Constitution. If there's one elected official that never sides with the Constitution in this country, very rarely is it your county attorney. Yeah. But so we take this case. We take this case to the Supreme Court, and I win. And Sheriff Prince from Montana and I go to the Supreme Court in '96, and they wanted us to do all of it: the background checks, keep the reports, and we could have done it. I mean, I would have probably hired a part-time secretary to do it all, but every single gun purchase had to cross my desk, and I had to give it permission or not. And we're not supposed to have that kind of power, no. And that's not my job assignment. But working for the federal government for free is not my job assignment either. And so when all this went down, I said, I'm not going to do this. And so I filed suit because we were threatened with a year in prison if we didn't do it.
Wow.
And so, of course I talked to my wife about it, and she gave me the blessing and she gave me the okay to go ahead. But if she hadn't, I wouldn't have done it. If she'd have said, man, we look at all the time and money and effort we put into getting this job, and you're just going to throw it away. They're not going to take this city down. They're going to go after you one way or the other. They're going to go after you. And I said, yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
And so this is what's really key here. I beat the Clinton administration on this. I sued the Clintons and lived to tell about it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now that's a miracle in and of itself. But this is what really happened. On June 27, 1997, I won at the Supreme Court the decision written by Justice Antonin Scalia. Mm-hmm. Amazing. And he went 10 times further than I ever dreamed. And man, oh man, everybody, you've got to get this. I'll make some quotes from this, and I'll tell you some quotes to just whet your appetite a little bit about this, because man, it's amazing. You'll read this and you go, where has this been my whole life? Because again, June 27, 1997. Well, after that, this cost me my third election, and people were tired of it, and it made me a large fish in a small pond. People didn't like that. And I didn't win at the Supreme Court until 9 months after I lost my sheriff job. If it had been reversed, if I had won and then went back to ask the people to rehire me as sheriff, I'm sure I would have been reelected. But this was such a controversy. And even the gun owners didn't support me for some crazy reason. But anyway, the NRA did, and the NRA named me Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, and I was inducted to the NRA Hall of Fame and all this stuff because this was so unique. But I went back to Utah because I really, a lot of people that knew me up there said, "Hey, come up here and run. This is a real conservative county." And I said, "Okay, I'll come back." And I did. And so I won the county convention where all the Republican delegates get together. It's kind of like the Republican National Convention. And this is just like the county convention. And they all get there. And if you get 60% of the delegates in the convention, you win. You're in. You go to the primary, but in that county, Democrats never win anyway. And so you're in, you're done. Mm-hmm. And so now get this. Remember the date that I won? June 27, 1997. I'm running for sheriff in Utah County, and the primary election is June 8th, 1998. 1 year almost to the day later. Okay? Guess what happens 3 days before the election? The FBI and IRS raid my office.
Oh, wow.
And I guess, I guess they just wanted to make sure that the newspaper got a headline story on it. And I mean, just a few hours after I got raided, here comes the newspaper. Mack raided by the FBI. Mm-hmm. Even more unique is that they felt it was so important to get that headline for me and so important to come serve this stupid search warrant that had nothing to do with me, but a client that I worked for. But he was my client. He didn't tell me what to do. I didn't know he was selling securities without a license. It had nothing to do with me. Regardless, whether I was the biggest criminal in the country or whether I was completely innocent of anything, didn't matter. They never contacted me again after I lost. Mm. They never asked me for an interview. They never asked me for an interrogation. They never indicted me. They never arraigned me. They never took me before a judge. Nothing. I never heard from them again. Yep. Ever.
The same thing happened with me with the FBI. They after raiding me and they leaked my name to the press, insinuating that I had committed a crime, which I never had. And it ended up being, the way that they went about it was they went around they didn't say, "Oh, Nate Cain has done this." No, they said, "Have you ever seen Nate Cain do this or do that?" It's like asking those questions with the intent of building that suspicion or trying to slander me, in my own community. And it's really, there's a few things that you mentioned that kind of caught my attention. First one, I had an experience too with my wife. I call her the Secretary of War. And so I came home after the Comey speech where he basically said Hillary Clinton had committed all these crimes, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against her out in front of the J. Edgar Hoover building.
And that's not his decision.
Nope.
He has no business talking about who's going to prosecute or who isn't.
Well, when I saw that, I knew at that point that the rumors that I had heard, because I had heard rumors that they were going to, basically cover up all of these crimes. And so I went looking to see if there was any truth to it. And I found all of these suspicious activity reports that had been analyzed by FBI that had a high probability of criminal activity. They had multiple case files open. They had multiple field offices that were investigating her. And I thought, oh, well, it's not true because they're investigating her. They're going to bring an indictment. I mean, the evidence was overwhelming. And then when he came out and did what he did, I knew right then, oh, no. It's true. They are going to cover this up. And so at that point, I went home. I'm laying in bed and my wife's looking at me. She's like, you're not talking tonight. What's going on? And so I told her, and I said, I think I'm going to need to blow the whistle on the FBI. And she sat up and she said, what? And she goes, why does it have to be you? And I said, because who else is it going to be? Nobody else is going to jeopardize their pension or anything like that. And I said, what if God put me in this position, just for this purpose? I don't want to stand before him someday and have him go, hey, remember that time I had you, there at the FBI and you did nothing. So, that was a huge driver, behind why I did what I did. Right. But, I think that these experiences that we have in life where we're like challenged, right? Where we have this moment, this opportunity where we can choose to do the right thing or we can choose to do the wrong thing. When we choose to do the right thing, it's like it pushes us further in that direction of having the strength to do the right thing the next time. Whereas I think if people choose not to do the right thing, it pushes them further in the other direction to where they'll be more and more silent and more, accepting, of the wrongs that are in this world. So, the case that you brought was incredibly important. The federal government has become way too powerful. And how in the world, one of the things I was shocked about, because I've never been a sheriff's deputy or anything like that. Never served in law enforcement. I've always been a cybersecurity guy. But I had an interview with my county sheriff a couple weeks ago, and for Berkeley County. And so I was doing some research ahead of time before the interview.
And that's still West Virginia?
Yes, West Virginia. Sheriff Blair, great guy, and I know him personally. He goes to my church, and so I said, hey, I want to interview you because I have a show on Tuesdays that's specifically about West Virginia issues. And in fact, I'm going to talk to him about your organization, make sure he's a part of it. So,
well, we want him to come to our September 7th Florida Freedom Foundation.
I saw that. Yeah. In fact,
we need you to help get him there.
I'm going to talk to some people and see if we can't sponsor to get him down there, because I think that would be incredibly important. Yeah. He is the sheriff of the largest county in the northern half of the state.
Oh man, yeah, he needs to be.
And absolutely, and he's a great man. But there is something that I found when I was doing my research that I had never seen before, and it says oftentimes we say sheriff's department, but that's actually not correct. It's actually an office, sheriff's office.
Never call it a department.
That's right, because a department, it's not a department because the sheriff is not appointed; he is elected. Right. He's an elected official, hence the word office. And so that's really what separates. This is why the FBI has no jurisdiction, in a county to tell the sheriff what to do. It's why the federal government should not have any say in what the sheriff does, because the sheriff is elected. None of these people who work for the FBI were ever elected to anything. No. Not the director of the FBI, not elected, appointed.
Yeah, they don't have to answer to anybody.
No, and that is part of the problem. And so, I have some questions that I want to get into with you about where the balance is, because obviously there are times where intercooperation between different agencies and departments and offices, right, happen. And we've had some good ones recently that just happened with a major drug raid and bust where they arrested, I think it was over 20 people and indicted, 32 or something like that, getting some really, really bad criminals, out of our county. But I want to get into that with you. But before I do, we need to cut to a short commercial break for just to give a word to our sponsors, and we'll be right back. So hang in there with us, folks. We got more interesting things to talk about.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Not believe, no detergent, no hot water, no fabric softener. Now you even threw away all the chemicals to clean your home. I don't need to buy sprays to cut through grease. I don't need to buy window cleaners. I don't need to buy carpet shampoo. I don't need to buy things to mop my floor. I don't need to buy things to take pesticide off my vegetables, fruits, and fish. Oh my gosh, where did this come from? I'll tell you where it came from. It came from hospitals. This is actually a photo of a huge commercial hospital laundry technology that cost in excess of $100,000 if you bought that whole thing, and it'll fill up your garage. That's how big it is. And what we've done with the advent of microelectronic technology, my team and I constantly use microtechnology just like your smartphone. The new EcoWasher SE is a chemical-free laundry and cleaning solution. Imagine, no more detergent, no more chemicals, saves you money, pays for itself, gives you a healthier life, and simplifies doing laundry. And now we're going to include 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis that purifies your home and sanitizes your surfaces like a thunderstorm in nature, eliminates all odors. Plus, you're receiving $100 off by using code podcast on the new EcoWasher SE. Let me remind you, 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis plus $100 off during this podcast. Podcast is your coupon code at Eco.
Military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, you won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
This is the Raising Cain Show, and we're back with Sheriff Mack. So, Mack, let me ask you something. You know, we were talking about right before we went to the break. I was bringing up the issues of where we find the balance with the federal government, or maybe some of these, you know, other out of the county agency, like might be here in West Virginia. We have, for example, what's called a fusion center, right, where they bring in intel and stuff like that. I've had major concerns about this, but at the same time, I want to see, you know, good things happening where they're getting, you know, bad criminals, dangerous criminals, you know, off of our streets. But there has to be a balance somewhere. And so I'm curious about your concerns about that, and how should that, what should the sheriff's office relationship be with other agencies when they do cooperative stuff? Because like in this case in Martinsburg, they had a massive raid and arrest, and involved the state police, probably DEA, I'm guessing, and maybe even FBI. And they got some really bad guys. They found massive amounts of cocaine and fentanyl. And of course, fentanyl is, you know, right now it's the #1 killer of Americans under the age of 45. And I think we had over 100,000 people die from it last year. We've got major problems.
Don't tell the Biden administration, because they don't give a damn about any of that.
Well, interestingly enough, and I've got to confirm this still with my sheriff, but I sent him a text message, so I'm waiting to hear back from him. But when I read the article in the basically their press release, every name on there was a Hispanic name. And I live in West Virginia. Okay, West Virginia is a predominantly, you know, white state. It's not to say that there aren't, you know, American citizens that are Hispanic names here, but it was unusual that every single name, and with fentanyl and cocaine and all of that, and they said there was also human trafficking going on. I'm guessing that
they don't care about that either.
I'm guessing that most, if not all, of the people arrested are probably non-U.S. citizens, probably cartel members or people who are connected to. I think this was, in this case, they were connected to the Sinaloa cartel. And so that tells me right now that most of those people were probably here illegally. And so how do we deal with this?
Well, let me get to your first part of that question, sure. And it's a really good question. Okay, where's the balance of power? Where do we strike that balance, and How do we know what it is? Read the Constitution. There is an absolute blueprint and the rule of law regarding the balance of power. And the intent of the founding fathers, first of all, was to make sure that King George III abuses could never repeat. And so that was their intent. And they were scared to death, the founders were, that they were going to form a new central government that would get out of control and repeat the abuses that they just fought a war to stop.
That's right.
Well, it's happened. No question. We have come full circle all the way back to 1776. Well, actually, when all the abuses started, maybe like 1767 and right there, and then through until the war started in 1775. But this is the thing. If we would all follow the Constitution, it'd be so simple to find that balance. But the federal government, the last 100 years, has continuously stolen and usurped power that is not constitutionally authorized. And the states have not enforced the 10th Amendment, and the checks and balances have been ignored. And the ultimate check and balance on federal authority are state officials and the state. And they're the ones that are supposed to enforce the 10th Amendment. So let's look at what I'm talking about. And you're going to get this real easy, and I'm sure your listeners will also. So if according to my Supreme Court case that Scalia wrote, it says that the federal government was granted not all governmental powers. Okay, there it is on page 7. Well, what kind of powers do they have? It says, but only discrete enumerated ones. Well, that's what the founding fathers wanted and intended. And then he said, and then I asked the question, how do you keep it that way? Which implication is rendered express by the 10th Amendment. And then he quotes the 10th Amendment. And folks, you have to understand the 10th Amendment. And it's pretty simple. The powers not delegated, and who was it that delegated those powers to the federal government? The states. We the people, or the states. The states mostly, because the 13 original states founded and formed our new federal government. Okay, so when they did that, well, let me finish the 10th Amendment first. The powers not delegated to the United States government by the Constitution are reserved to the states or to the people. Now, they are, just like Scalia said, they're enumerated. What does that mean? You can number them. You can go through the Constitution, grab your pocket Constitution, go through the Constitution and list. You can list them. You can number them. Every power that was delegated constitutionally to the federal government. Okay, so let's get even more specific, because you and I do not care for the FBI at all. Either one of them. Rightfully so. The people should feel the same. But how many powers in law enforcement were actually delegated to the federal government? You don't know, do you? No.
I don't think any.
It's not zero. It's almost zero.
Oh, maybe the border is probably one.
That's
of them.
one, but you're going to go like this. You're going to have a V8 moment as soon as I tell you. There's 5.
Okay.
There's 5. Let's go through them real quick. Treason. Don't you wish they would investigate treason?
Oh yeah.
Hillary
I can think of
Clinton
people that should be right on there. That's right.
Next
that's right.
one. Counterfeiting.
Okay, that's
is
true.
in Article 1, Section 8. Federal government's supposed to take care of that. And then felonies committed on the high seas or piracies.
Okay,
the
that makes
states,
sense. Yeah.
the states aren't supposed to get ships and go out and patrol the oceans. The federal government is. Then the one you mentioned, Article 4, Section 4 says the United States shall guarantee that our borders are not invaded. No invasion on our borders. Now, after we've had 40 million people invade our country, and many of them are members of the cartels, The cartels have now set up shop in Arizona and across the country. Every state has cartels now, all of them. Okay. They also have just about the same amount of international terrorists from the Middle East that have infiltrated our country, who have absolutely, with the complicity of Mexican and other governments, but it has to be Mexico because that's the last border that they have to go through to come into America.
Yep. Chinese saboteurs.
This administration has allowed international enemies known as Middle Eastern terrorists to set up shop in America. That has happened. We now have also about 25,000 Chinese dissidents and even more Russians. And all of this, all because of why? Because the Democrat Party and this Democrat administration want to put more people on the voter rolls so that they can have a monopoly of power politically from Bangor, Maine to Honolulu, Hawaii. And that's why they've done this. That is treason. It is election fraud. It is criminal. It's aiding and abetting criminal activity from the illegal immigrants. And they've done it all. And they've got away with it because the press has allowed them to. If the press sides with you, you can get away with anything. Just ask Barack Obama.
Well, the press is owned. I mean, that's a fact. And not just the press, but social media as well. I mean, we know from the Twitter files that you had the FBI having a hand in being able to, get them to stop, pushing the Hunter Biden laptop story because they said it was Russian disinformation.
Yeah, but let me add one other thing to that though too. Okay, so who's supposed to make sure that the federal government, if they come into our states, don't go beyond their allotted delegated powers? Well, that's your sheriff. The sheriff is the last line of defense in your county. He also is the only elected law enforcement officer in your county. And he answers directly to you. Look, the sheriff has no other supervisors or bosses. He only reports to you. And every 4 years, you get to choose whether or not he stays or someone else takes his place. And so let me give you an example of all of this. This actually involved the state police instead of the FBI, but this came down from the federal government. The CDC gives these mandates to close down, to wear masks, to shut your schools, shut your business, shut your churches. And we actually had a sheriff in Tampa, Florida, arrest Pastor Rodney Howard Brown for having church.
I remember that.
It became an international story. Because why? Because the United States government and some state governments were violating the first principle in the First Amendment, and that is freedom of religion, all in the name of COVID-19. And we'll give it back to you after we destroy it or we take it away from you, but we'll give it back someday. Whoever believes that must. But anyway, so this was absolutely horrible and out of line. Okay, there's no emergency clause for any of our God-given rights. Okay, we can give them up willingly, which is basically what we did, but I didn't. I very rarely wore a mask, only on planes when they would threaten to kick me off. But even on planes, as long as I was eating and drinking, I didn't have to have the mask on, and I fly all the time. And so I would gain a lot of weight during that time. I was always eating nuts or crackers or whatever, cracker cheese. But anyway, this is the other side of the coin. This was the tale of two cities, or the tale of two sheriffs. The same thing happens in New Mexico. And Pastor Caleb Cooper went to his sheriff and said, I'm not closing down. The government doesn't run my church. Jesus Christ does. Wow. There's a novel idea. And he said to the Sheriff Glenn Hamilton, he said, I want to know what you're going to do to protect me and my congregation, because we're not going to shut down. And this is a little bit different answer. Sheriff Hamilton said, if it takes that I have to go to jail myself, I will do everything in my power to protect you and your congregation. And you're right, as guaranteed in the First Amendment. So here comes the state police, authorized by the commie Governor Grisham, a lady governor that thinks she can do whatever she wants. And she sent the police to shut him down. Well, the sheriff would happen to be there that day. He knew they were coming. And he went out and told them, and he said, hey, I have deputized every single person in that church. And they all work under me. This church is under my authority, and you're not shutting it down, and you're not going to stay either. And they left. And Pastor Cooper never shut down one single day. Now, folks, I formed the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association in 2011, but I was teaching and training other peace officers and sheriffs ever since my Supreme Court case that came out in 1997. I ran a campaign on it in 1998, as I mentioned earlier. I've been trying to get sheriffs and public officials and peace officers to adhere to enforce, to cherish, to uphold, and mostly to enforce the principles of the Constitution, and even more specifically, the Bill of Rights. And when it has been so gratifying to see when the light goes on with these sheriffs and other public officials, when they get it and they go, oh yeah, huh? That's our job. And to protect you from the tyranny and abuse of any form of government, wherever it comes from, state, local, or federal, I don't care. His job and local law enforcement's job is to protect you from tyranny and abuse.
Yep.
Oh, let me ask one other question here. I want to ask everybody on this, and hopefully anybody in law enforcement or your sheriff. Which sheriff are you, Sheriff? The one in Tampa who arrested Pastor Rodney Howard Brown, or the one in New Mexico who said this isn't going to happen and defended it, and he never shut down one day? Which sheriff do you want in your community, ladies and gentlemen? My dear brothers and sisters of America, which sheriff do you want? We've been providing that. And here, real coincidental, the one sheriff in Tampa never came to any of our training. He had been invited, but he never came. Sheriff Hamilton has come 2 or 3 times. You want to see the difference? Get your sheriff educated. Get your sheriff to Orlando, Florida, to the on the 6th. He needs to be there on the 6th of September at the Rosen Shingle Creek Hotel. And every sheriff that can get there is going to have the best education on the Constitution that anyone could ever provide. And you're welcome to come, and you can see it for yourself. You'll see the lights come on these public servants when they realize their duty to protect and serve and uphold and defend. And folks, we can't do this without you. And you've got to get involved to get your sheriff there. And you want to have a relationship with your sheriff, and you want to talk to your sheriff about getting there, and don't take no for an answer. This is in 4 weeks. Okay? A little bit less than 4 weeks. And it starts at 5:00 Friday night. And that's the most important one for all the sheriffs, because that's where we're going to make some big decisions about what we're going to tell local and state and federal bureaucrats what they're allowed to do in your county. How would you like the IRS to be told by your sheriff, no more random audits? Well, that's what we're going to do. That's one of them. So, folks, we've got a lot of work to do, and we absolutely need you, and we need you to join our CSPOA posse, and we will train you how to work with your sheriff, and we will train you how to get a posse in your county. Join CSPOA posse at cspoa.org. Become a part of the solution. This is the only peaceful and effective solution we have left.
Yep. I'm bringing up the page here to share it so that folks can see. Let me close that real quick here. So this, folks, is where you can go find out more information if you go to cspoa.org. And that Florida Foundation for Freedom Conference, you can click there and you can get more information about it, who the speakers are and what they're going to be talking about. Also, I want to also mention something else too that I think is something that's really important as well. Look, folks, we have an opportunity to take back, authority and power back in our states through the people that we elect. You think about this. I look at it like this. When you think about how hard it is to get rid of a corrupt governor or a corrupt congressman or a corrupt senator. It's dang near impossible. But if you got a corrupt sheriff, you can get rid of him pretty easily because you're talking about the county level. Yeah. And yet that person has a lot of authority and a lot of power. And so we have an opportunity to really take back that authority through our sheriff and, making sure that we're getting good sheriffs elected. But, it's not just enough to say, oh, yeah, this is something we believe. We need to show up and vote. And we need to get people out there and vote. And we need to know about who it is that we're voting for. I was just kind of looking up some information, and I was trying to research about, how number of sheriffs, and we've got 3,081 sheriffs in the United States, 3,081. And when you think about what has happened to, say, our DAs that have been largely, and our attorney generals that have been largely taken over by the far left due to George Soros putting money into these races. Let's not forget that Soros spent $2 million to defeat Sheriff Arpaio. Yeah. And so we have
to continue that one. That guy quit. That was paid by Soros. Paul Penzone was the sheriff, and he quit 6 months ago. And now Jerry Sheridan, who I was working with very closely to get him elected, he won the primary big time in a landslide. And so now we have the huge opportunity in Maricopa County to get elected a very powerful, good, honest, constitutional sheriff.
Yep. And I would say that most people obviously know who they're voting for when it comes to president. Many people may know who they're voting for when it comes to senator or governor or congressman. But very few people know anything about their sheriffs or anything about their state legislature. Wow. And those are probably more important than the other stuff, because except for maybe president, because the fact is that in terms of actually being able to impact your community, the sheriff's one of the most important roles that is out there.
Most important race in America is the president, and next it's the governor, and next it's the sheriff.
I would agree with you on that.
100%.
Yep.
And your sheriff can actually tell in the proper jurisdiction, in the sphere of authority, as Scalia talks in here, he can tell them to take a hike. And
I got it.
Let me tell you one quote from here.
Sure.
Scalia actually quotes the Federalist Papers. He quotes the Founding Fathers. He quotes the Constitution. And that's why this case is so powerful, folks. You got to see this. But at one point he says, Federalist 51, hence a double security arises to the rights of the people, end quote. And then I'm asking a question. How? He finishes. The different governments will control each other at the same time that they're controlled by themselves. Folks, any question as to whether or not the federal government will control itself, then your sheriff is a different government that is supposed to be making sure that they never are allowed to abuse or bash your civil rights. And that if we put them all on notice, every bureaucrat on notice, that the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, will be enforced strictly in our counties, then we get to the other part where Scalia says, but the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions and ... protects us from, quote, the crisis of the day. Now, folks, what does that do to what's happened to America the last 3 or 4 years? It completely takes us back to the foundation of our Constitution. And folks, this is the most powerful 10th Amendment decision ever. It's one of the most powerful cases ever, but it is absolutely the most powerful 10th Amendment. And you need this, and they cost $2, or you get 3 for $5. And this is easy to get. We'll send them out to you as soon as you make your order. Get these little booklets. $2. You think I'm trying to make a bunch of money here? No. I want you guys to have this. It's ammunition for liberty. I have some other books there too. The County Sheriff America's Last Hope. You should get that too. The County Sheriff America's Last Hope, and this. Amazing. But folks, most importantly right now, you need to get your sheriff to that convention, that conference, a conference regarding a plan of action that you've got to be a part of.
So we're a little past the top of the hour, and I normally only go to about an hour for the show, but I'd like to extend that if you're willing to stay on. I think this is such an important topic, and there are a number of other things that I hoped to be able to get to, and questions that I have for you about what we can do, as citizens. And are you able to stay on for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I'd say another 15 minutes.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about and get into is I have heard there's another group out there that I've been kind of listening to and reading some of their literature called Tactical Civics. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Say that again.
Tactical Civics.
Oh, tactical. Okay.
Yeah. So they have an interesting concept that I had never heard of before. But one of the things that they're talking about is how, and they encourage working through your sheriff's office to do this sort of thing. But they have mentioned that part of the problem that we have is that the grand jury process has been basically captured by the federal government, and it was never meant to be. If you look at the original Constitution, you look at the way that laws were set up under common law early in America. They see it as that one of the ways that we should be able to deal with essentially arresting corrupt public officials and dealing with because right now, let's face it, if one of your deputies were to go out there and violate somebody's rights, pull them, yank them out of the car and beat the hell out of them, the FBI would show up and arrest them and possibly convict them for deprivation of rights under color of law. But if the FBI does it, and they do it all day long, in fact, we saw this happen. There was a federal court case where over 278,000 illegal uses of Section 702 were used of FISA were used to spy on American citizens, mostly related to January 6th. They violated their Fourth Amendment rights, and yet no one has gone to jail for that. It's a felony, and not a single one of them has gone to jail. So what I'm concerned about is how do we effectively go after those who are violating our rights and through the legal process bring them to justice. And I think that this idea of a constitutional grand jury in conjunction with working with the sheriff's office, we could bring something like that.
Well, I think somebody's going to have to define the constitutional grand jury, and it's not very well defined in the Constitution. It mentions it in the 7th Amendment. And then some people say that, Scalia said that, no, you can do that. No, people weren't quoting that correctly. But I'll go back to the Constitution on this. And I'll go back to the sheriff on this, because I think it's a lot simpler than what the tactical civics is talking about. It is, just like I told you at the very beginning. To strike that balance, all you need to do is go to the Constitution. First and foremost, your constitutional law enforcement officer is your sheriff. Mm-hmm. And then if you have a complaint that someone in government has committed a crime, then ask your sheriff to investigate it. Now, if it didn't occur in your county, well, one, you shouldn't be complaining about it too awfully much, unless you're talking about something coming from Washington, D.C. that affected everybody, and then they're pushing it. But right now, if your sheriff is doing his job, he doesn't allow them to come in the county and abuse you. He does not allow gun control. He's not going to allow the federal government to come in and go door to door. He's not even going to allow one time where the BATF agents come in, which has just recently happened, where the citizen that got knocked on the door by a BATF agent called the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office came and drew down on him and told him to get lost. Well, folks, if the sheriff knows his job and knows the Constitution and knows his responsibility enforcing it, there's not going to be any more IRS random, baseless, without probable cause audits. The federal government is not allowed that kind of power. And so it doesn't matter what is happening in your county. If you have a complaint, a criminal complaint against another public official, take it to your sheriff and get it investigated. Joe Arpaio investigated President Obama while he was president, and his posse provided the investigators. Okay? And they proved that he did falsify his birth certificate.
Yep.
And I've seen the evidence. I've seen the presentation. We had his investigator at one of our CSPOA conventions. It was true. He had him. And Obama's big mistake was that he fabricated a birth certificate. He didn't need to do anything. No one required him to do that.
No. Yeah.
He just did it because he was scared and he thought, oh man, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't try to fabricate this birth certificate. When he did that, then he committed a crime. Before, there was no evidence against him.
That's right.
Because the hospital in Honolulu wouldn't divulge any of the records. And so they Hawaii legislature actually passed a law called incessant vexation. And so people that called too much to ask for Obama's birth certificate were charged with a crime, because they couldn't call and ask that. So they would tell them, they first gave him a warning on the phone, you can't call that anymore. But if you do, it's against the law now, and we turn it over to the police. This is how stupid it got. But at the same time, you need to remember this part. The sheriff of Maricopa County investigated criminally the president of the United States. And folks, there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fine. I had a rancher come into my office and say, this is my permit to graze my cows. And I believe that the Bureau of Land Management committed a felony because they forged a signature on it. I turned it over to my investigator. The investigator investigated it. We found out and learned that it wasn't a forgery and everything was fine. But I told Charles, says my investigator, he said, I'm supposed to investigate the federal government. I said, what county are they in? He said, Graham. I said, that's our county. And we have a complaint. Now go investigate it. And he was a good guy and a good investigator. He just wanted to make sure we had authority. And we did. It's called the geographical boundaries of our county. It doesn't matter who. It matters where and what. Okay? So it doesn't matter. I don't care who commits the crime.
That's
so
one more.
Every sheriff would wake up and get educated. And if the American people would also wake up and get their sheriff educated, and you've got to be educated too. So anyway,
well, that's another very good reason why I recommend the folks get to know your sheriff. Get to know him. I found that my sheriff is very reachable. He's a good guy. He's down to earth. Look, he's got to get elected. It's not like it's not like a chief of police who's appointed.
He's a bureaucrat.
That's right. Who could give?
And we want chiefs of police involved also. So talk to your chief also, and we want the sheriffs to talk to the chiefs of police and get them going. But they answer to the town manager. That's right.
That's right. So the sheriff is an important role, and folks, you need to get to know them, and you need to to be bringing this organization to their attention if they're not already aware of it, and encouraging them to get involved. I'm certainly going to be doing that. I've got a great relationship with our sheriff, and our sheriff is he's up for election. He just won the Republican primary, but he was appointed because our previous sheriff stepped down. So So this is his, his opportunity to, kind of show where he stands on the issue of constitutionality. So I'm definitely going to be talking to him about it. I always like to end the show by, giving you the last word. And right now, we've got, over 1,700 people that are watching live right now. It's your opportunity to get the word out to them, kind of your last words and anything that you want them to take away from the show. So please do so. And then I'll end in prayer and we'll end the show.
Good. I want to stay for the prayer. Okay, folks, let me read my favorite quote. Let me read one of my favorite quotes. This is from Madison. There are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments from those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. So the greatest threat to our God-given American liberty is our own federal government. But those encroachments are no longer silent, and they're not gradual. They're bold in our face, and they're really coming after us, and they're destroying our Constitution. Our Constitution is on her deathbed. America is on her deathbed because our foundation is being destroyed. We can take it back. There is a peaceful and effective solution. If you're not part of the process, it's not going to happen. Just voting for another Democrat or Republican is no longer the answer and no longer the solution. No matter who gets elected president, you want and you need a constitutional sheriff in your county. And the reasons are many and they're obvious. The ultimate protector, the last line of defense for you and your family, is your county sheriff. We ask you to get involved with us. We ask you to join the solution. It's a whopping $11 a month to be a member of our posse. And then we bless you, you bless us. We keep funded, we keep going. That's the only funding we get. We have a skeletal budget. And right now I'm speaking from my office in my home because I can't afford to go and get one. But folks, that's fine with me. And the Lord has blessed us. And he will continue to bless us as long as we're working to restore the stewardship that was ours as Americans. And that is, what did he say? Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We must be vigilant. We must be involved. And this is a peaceful but bold and courageous solution and process. We've got to act. And we've got the plan together, and we've got it for you. We're laying it out for you tonight. It's on our website. And I'm asking each one of you, as a fellow American, as a fellow Christian, I'm asking each of you to join us and be a part of this and join our posse, cspoa.org. Become a member today. And then if you don't like what we're doing, quit. But if you want to see this event on September 7th and get your sheriffs there, remember, they got to be there on September 6th at 5 o'clock, September 6th in the evening, and then all day Saturday on the 7th. But folks, this is going to change America, and it's not a wake-up tour. It is a plan of action that is all for you to do with your sheriff. It can happen. I've seen it happen. I've done it. We've got proof this works. Now we just need to make it bigger, better, and faster. And you being involved with us really helps. Okay? I love America. And I know we can keep this peaceful. But if you and your sheriff aren't involved, it doesn't stay peaceful.
Well, Sheriff Mack, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us in a lot of these issues. I really appreciate it. I hope that you'll come back on the show again in the future. And I always, like I said, I like to end in prayer. And just I know that one thing our founders understood was they understood the need for the providence of God. And I know that we have to do our part. Is that faith without works is dead. But I also know that, that if we, unless the Lord builds a house, those that labor in vain. And unless the Lord protects the city, those guarding the city are doing it in vain. So we need God's assistance and aid in this. And I know you know that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just thank you, God, for this opportunity to meet Sheriff Mack and talk with him and to hear from him about what he has learned throughout the years and his depth of knowledge. I pray, Lord, that you would bless him and his mission of what you've called him to, and also the mission of his organization. I pray that you would bring in all of the sheriffs across the land, Lord, to come to this event that can possibly be there. And I pray that you would restore constitutional governance and constitutional law enforcement through the sheriff's offices in various counties across the land. Lord, we need your help. We need your help to overcome the dark forces that have taken over many of the institutions, especially within the federal government in this country. And I pray, God, that you would bring restoration through our sheriff's office, that you would end the corruption that has oftentimes encroached into our civil rights through the federal government. Lord, I thank you and pray your protection over all of our law enforcement officers, Lord, and keep them safe, especially those, Lord, who we have elected and asked to be there to represent us. We pray and ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen, and thank you. And it was a pleasure to be with you. And yes, let's do it again.
All right.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change. The time is now. We gotta raise some cane.